All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? I'll do my best to kind of keep an eye on the attendee list and let people in as I go. I'm going to go ahead and give some quick introductions on who I am and what we do here at Reviewer in just a few seconds. But I think first let's do a couple things. So one is a couple quick housekeeping items, then maybe kind of set the stage a little bit for why today's topic, kind of how it became, and then kind of what we're going to go through today. So, as I'm sure we're all aware by now, there's a built-in chat function within Zoom. I'm going to go ahead and keep that up for the entire conversation. If there's any questions or comments or insights or things that you guys want to add to today's discussion, by all means, toss them in there. We'll either kind of address them as we go, we'll save them for the end, we'll kind of just play it by ear as we go. But I'm going to go ahead and keep that open the entire conversation. So if there's anything I can do for you, please do toss it in there. So with that said, kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of today's conversation, really to maybe set the stage on how we got to this point. So I'm going to go backwards a little bit. I'm going to kind of give a quick introduction of who I am at Reviewer, and then let's go back to today's topic. So at a high level, we started the company in 2012. My name is Kyle. I'm the CEO here at Reviewer, and we actually built Reviewer kind of as in a weird perspective. So we served on a review committee for a lot of these types of application-based review and selection programs. I know it's a broad term, but as you guys are very well aware, kind of living within the membership-based association world, there's a lot of use cases for a platform like Reviewer, things like member recognition awards, scholarships, grants, fellowships, board nominations, conference, abstracts, speakers, proposals. That list goes on and on and on. So in a prior life, we served as a volunteer on the review committees. So back then, we went through the process of, hundreds and hundreds of binders being mailed to us. We were asked with handwriting our notes and our feedback and our scores and mailing it back in. We did the 6 hour long committee meetings on the weekends. And then we also kind of went through that transitionary period when organizations went online. And that was really a wide variety of, built-in web forms and downloading of documents and emails and spreadsheets. And again, that list goes on and on and on. We started to see the negative ramifications that came with that type of workflow. So not to get too deep in the weeds on that, but we started to see scholarship and award applications that went to spam filters. We saw lost or misplaced information. We saw, because of the inability to redact personal identifying information, other review committee members making very clear and biased selections. So we had enough of these negative experiences that led us to build Reviewer as kind of two main goals. So number one was to kind of lower the barrier and create a bunch of efficiencies around these types of campaigns, right? In any given day, I don't feel that our best use of time is downloading of documents and emails and spreadsheets. But at the same time, we on this call actually make a very small percentage of participants in these campaigns. Your nominees, your applicants, your review committees, your board members, your stakeholders, they make up a much larger percentage. So how do we elevate their experience as well? So fast forwarding here to 2024, we do thousands of these campaigns every year, from the largest of the large membership-based associations to your small, not even full staffed local Midwest-based membership group and things like that. And that kind of brings us full circle to today's conversation and kind of what we're doing. So from a software perspective, the platform powers these programs from start to finish. We actually take on a very deep, robust kind of implementation onboarding process, just because we have so many unique features and components and use cases and best practices that we've seen, that we like to kind of work alongside our clients during setup. Now, the reason why I bring that up is in recent conversation with multiple membership-based associations, they had asked us, what type of clients and organizations that we work with that very specifically offer a 30 under 30 or a 40 under 40 type of award program to engage kind of that younger demographic of membership. There's been a lot of studies and a lot of surveys that have been done about kind of what's the future look like for membership-based associations and kind of that next generation or phase of membership. How do we capture them very, very early on? How do we engage them to build really a 40 or 50-year membership, right? With these really active members. And so we started looking at our portfolio of organizations that we work with. And I remember from, last year in a in-person webinar we hosted with the National Association of REALTORs. And that was a conversation we had with them of their 30 under 30 awards. And that was really targeted towards trying to engage and hook a younger member, a demographic of member, to create lifelong stakeholders. And so as we had these discussions, then the questions became, okay, great. So how do we actually structure and run those types of awards? And that's when we decided to kind of host a really high level webinar of kind of the background and ideation behind those. And then ultimately, like, what are the core components and elements that go into running what I call like an X under X award. Now, to be very clear, this conversation and these elements that we're going to talk about translate to all award programs, quite frankly, scholarships, grants, proposals, abstracts, all those as well. But I want to kind of set the stage a little bit of how we got to this point. So, with all that said, I do want to kind of run through kind of four key components. So number one is what I call the submission experience, which is actually very unique and different than I think a lot of typical award programs where we rely on nominations and we review those. It's instead going to be a dual nominator nominee workflow, which I'm going to kind of get into in here just a second. Number two is mostly from a marketing perspective, but also how do we kind of give our applicants a voice and differentiate one nominee from somebody else? And that's including external references. And if we're going to go that route, how do we do it the right way? And then the last piece of the puzzle really is kind of two parts. One is how do we create a multi-phase, multi-round review process that incorporates two things? One is a very low barrier selection process, but then two is like a public aspect that engages our broader membership base. And then the third piece of that, and kind of in conjunction, is how do we ensure and build community confidence and member trust through a very fair, non-biased, compliant selection process. So the goal today is to kind of run through the high level those core components and then also kind of visualizing what that may look like in reviewer. By no means am I trying to showcase and demo the platform today, although we are going to definitely look at it. It's more so to kind of visualize like these concepts and practicality. So with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the bulk of today's conversation. And that's going to start with that dual nominator nominee process. And I actually, looking at the list of individuals on the call today, there is an alumni association on this call who I actually believe is already doing this. And I think it's a very unique and it's an emerging trend with all types of recognition programs. And again, traditionally speaking, you collect open call for nominations. So who are you? Who are you nominating? Why? The challenge with that workflow is that we're asking people to submit nominations. They're not the nominees themselves, although sometimes it is a self-nomination. And we're asking them to put forth time and energy on behalf of someone else. I love my wife to death, but I'm going to be honest with you. If I was to write a nomination about her, it would be significantly worse than what she writes about me. It's just that she's going to put forth more time, more energy. She's a better writer than I am. So is that a reflection on her as the nominee and the candidate? Probably not. And so the idea behind this is to break the process into two pieces. We start with an open call for nominations, really as a way to increase volume marketing, getting the word out there. Who are you? Who are you nominating and why? Keep it super simple, lower the barrier, and then actually treat it like the Emmys or the Oscars, where the nominee themselves actually finds out that they were nominated, and you can make it very anonymous, and they quote unquote accept their nomination. And in doing so, they actually join what was filled out about them. And some of our clients are going to allow them to see what was said. Others will keep it very private and almost break into two parallel workflows where, there was something said about you. We're not going to tell you what. Here's what we want you to fill out. But the goal there is number one is it creates like a one-to-one communication relationship between you as an association and that member. Again, in the sense of today's conversation, it's a younger demographic, a member, one that we're really, really trying to push on building these relationships with. And then you're also putting the bulk of the energy and work on them. And so, as we get into, again, this will be different for all awards, but anytime you're collecting things like resumes or very personal details about the nominee, it's going to come from them anyways. And so why don't we just have it directly come from them to start with? So we can ensure that the data is going to be accurate. The effort and energy levels are may not always going to be the same, but at least when we go to conduct a review, we're comparing apples to apples. We're reviewing what the nominee said about themselves. And at the end of the day, it just kind of creates a much better process. It's also awesome from a marketing perspective because we can really boost volume. Human nature tells us that we always will procrastinate. So we have multiple different kind of conversion metrics that we can look at with this type of process. We can look at, okay, how many people have started nominations that haven't yet finished. We can look at the number of people who have been nominated but haven't yet accepted it. And then those that accepted the nomination but haven't yet finished it. And then from there, start to leverage built-in reminders and emails and automation. That in itself typically sees a reviewer client increase volume by about 30%. So a lot of moving parts and a lot of things there. What does this actually look like? So again, this is going to pull the National Association of Realtors 30 under 30 awards. Again, The main goal of this campaign is to identify and target, 30 individuals who are kind of up and coming within the space. Everything we're going to talk about, again, to reiterate, isn't relevant just to this style award. It's really all recognition programs. And then the review selection side of things is super relevant for any of these types of campaigns. So most of our clients will use their existing websites, right? From a content and a marketing perspective, like let's leverage your brand. And then from there, the applicants will click on a link that says, click here to nominate. And that's actually what brings them into reviewer. Now, I'm going to get more in depth into like the concept of a profile later on. But again, the main goal here is we have to lower the barrier for the nominator. I've seen a million ways of running an award program, and you can absolutely still do self-nominations. So think of it like built-in conditional logics or interactive workflows where, you might say, hey, are you nominating yourself or is this for a peer? If they say I'm nominating myself, it puts them into one track. If they say I'm nominating somebody else, they then again will fill out their own information. It'll notify the nominee, and then they actually will come in and go through the same track as if somebody had said I am a self-nominee. So again, we're kind of pushing people and siloing them down to kind of whatever path serves us best. In this example, though, again, this is where the nominator is starting the process. And so again, we have to lower the barrier. These are people who are, again, the idea is to increase volume. So who are you? Who are you nominating? And then maybe just a paragraph or explanation on why are you nominating that individual. I've also started to see a lot of like video nominations coming in. I think it's a really cool way to kind of collect marketing collateral. So in the future, when we go to celebrate our award recipients, we can go back and look at like the quick, 2 to 4 minute videos that were collected about them. Again, no right or wrong way of doing that. You can actually have those come back later on too. So maybe you're not collecting it about everybody, but you can reach back out to the nominators and say, hey, your nominee was listed as a finalist. Would you mind, sending this information to us? That way you're not putting that effort on everybody, just a select few. Obviously, platforms like Reviewer have the components in place to power that. So again, nominator, who are you? Who are you nominating? Why? This in return will then trigger a notification that goes to the nominee. So it'd say, hey, Kyle, you've been nominated for this year's 30 under 30 awards. Click here to begin your application. So again, in this example, there's a lot of data and science around like how to engage with a younger demographic and membership. Quite frankly, that demographic wants to be engaged with. They want to participate. They want to kind of showcase. They want to show their value. And so awards inherently are already a really engaging type of activity or marketing campaign for them. But then again, the idea is to kind of build a relationship. So now we started to open the door to one-to-one communication between them. So in this example, the nominee will then join the nomination. Typically speaking, they do create a profile at this time. The profiles themselves are extremely important in the grand scheme of things because you've got, nominator, nominee, you've nomination form, application forms, you've got file uploads, references, you've got communication, you've got judging and selection processes. And so kind of foreshadowing, I hate to see you use a tool or any type of platform that's siloed. And so I'm going to make sure that all those activities I just referenced get centralized at some point in time. And that's how we do it here at Reviewer, is through a concept called a profile. So nominees will come in, they accept their nomination, and then quite frankly, they start filling out their form. The goal here, though, is again, we want to put the bulk of the effort and the energy on the nominees, not the nominators. If you have an award program or if you have multiple awards where there's different criteria or eligibility, this would be a great place to bake in some type of eligibility quiz or criteria. This is a very simple example in the sense that, like, you have to be turning 30 by a certain date. So if I'm not 30, then I'm going to go ahead and it'll disqualify them. But if you have a really robust award program where there's a numerous different requirements or collateral, now you can ask them a series of questions. You know what? I've actually seen some programs that base off of the answers that people fill out, it actually recommends to them or matches them with the awards or the scholarships or the grants that actually best align. So there's a lot of really powerful things that we can do here. So in this example, nominee then kind of proceeds on. This might be an example of what it would look like if they weren't eligible. Again, we don't want to waste an applicant's time applying. We don't want to waste your time in reviewing people that aren't even, qualified. So kind of showcase those adaptive workflows. If they were qualified, then it drops them into the bulk of the application. Again, this is a rather unique type of award program. It's dealing with real estate. It deals with sales numbers. It deals with real estate, ID numbers. This is all data that only the nominees themselves would know about themselves. So it makes total sense that they're going to be the ones that submit it. So again, I got Ryan here. Ryan's the nominee, and he's basically just filling out a bunch of information or questions about himself. Again, I mentioned beforehand, there's sales metrics, there's some short answers, there's some essays, there's some file uploads. If you have a program where those files are going to be kind of secure and very, very private, we got you covered here at Reviewer. We're a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant company. But again, applicant kind of fills that out. I'm going to come back to the files because one of the things that we're going to talk about is accessing information. I'd hate to see you have to download and export all these things as well. So there's some kind of cool tools that we have in place to access those deliverables. Applicants can save, they can log out, they can come back later. And this is really, again, where this award in general has quite a few essay prompts, right? And so this is again where we don't want the nominator to have to answer these questions just because A, it might not be accurate. B, it's a lot of energy. They're just not going to have the time or energy to do this. So again, put it on the nominee to do it. So they answer a series of questions, and then it brings us to the references. I'm going to go ahead and kind of introduce this concept now, although we might come back to it a bit more later on. So I love references. I think that they're very commonly used in scholarships, grants, some speaker call for abstracts. It's an emerging trend in an award program, and the reason why I like them is, we already have a little bit of information about the nominee from the nominator. But what better way of getting more subjective insights about somebody than from a reference? The challenge, though, is that they're hard to do. So they're being asked at the last minute. And old school, historically, you're asked to write a letter. And quite frankly, if I get notified saying, hey, write a letter of reference, I'm just not going to do it. I don't have the energy. Instead, though, in reviewer, what you could do is you could put in like the name and email of the person who's supposed to submit the reference. It could trigger a notification to them saying, hey, Frederick, you've been asked to write a reference on behalf of Ryan. Click here to do so. And then Frederick would then simply click on a link. Now, you can still do reference uploads. However, the thing I love to see is maybe have them fill out a reference template. So, like, what are 3 to 4 essay prompts, short, simple, and sweet, that you want the reference to talk about? So in this case, it might be like, tell us more about Ryan's leadership, tell us more about Ryan's sales experience, right? I'm making up examples. But the way that we do this is that we're lowering the barrier for the reference. And it's also making it where when we go to do a review, it's very, very consistent data, right? Every single applicant has the same data points associated with them. You might also consider having the reference answer a series of questions on a point scale. So rank Kyle's leadership skills on a scale from 1 to 8. So things like that. So again, in review, it's all automated. The applicant just puts in who's going to be doing the reference. It triggers a notification. They then click on a link and then they fill it out. Again, going back to that profile concept though, it'll aggregate and take, nomination forms, application forms, references, you name it, and put them into one centralized hub together. It creates like what I call a virtual binder on behalf of the nominee. So Ryan then kind of wraps up the process. Just to kind of visualize that for you, again, in this example, the reference would have got that email notification. They would have then clicked on a link. And then this is a way for you to visualize the reference letters I talked about, where, yeah, you could totally do a reference letter upload. But instead, like, let's ask this person to answer these 6 or 7 questions and then score them on a scale from 1 to 8. I also want to kind of point out too the multimedia capture. So I know it's a very large image, it's kind of right in our face. I got a very big monitor. But the goal here is in this example, they're also trying to collect some marketing collateral. Traditionally speaking, I think you can ask the finalists or the nominees who are kind of in the last bulk later on to submit these things. In this example, they're collecting it on the front end, but the applicant is uploading a photo. They're filling out like an e-signature, terms of agreement, any additional deliverables. And then once they're done, they go ahead and submit. So again, really simple online experience. The name of the game is we gotta lower the barrier for absolutely everybody. There are way too many award programs out there that could have a ton more volume that don't, just because of the complexity of the system. I do want to kind of note and add one last piece here, and that's potential payment. So it's been a very big emerging trend where you have the nominations that come in. Again, it's free, right? You fill out your nomination form. However, if the applicant themselves wants to be considered for an award, there's some type of fee, either member versus non-member rates, which is also a great way to convert people to members. You could have discounts on early versus late fees, but it's a way to generate non-member due revenue. It could be a small amount, it could be a large amount. That's obviously up to you guys. If that is the case, Reviewer does have a built-in payment module, which basically drops the applicant onto a shopping cart. I've even seen some people tie in their membership dues here, right? So if you're a non-member, you need to sign up to be a member before you'll actually take in the application. So just kind of one little bonus tidbit to think through. Obviously, that's not something that we're looking at here, but it is something I see quite a bit of. The next thing that we're going to look at is going to be the right way to collect. Oh, reference, we already did that. Is going to be the review and selection process. And again, I like to kind of take these webinars and kind of just run with them. So if there's any questions about anything I just talked about or the references, we can kind of come back to that. What I would argue, though, is one of the most critical aspects to an award program is once these nominations come in, I am going to show you how to manage them just at a high level, because I threw a ton of curveballs at you. It's going to be, how do you structure and create like a review and selection process? And it depends on your organization. We have some clients that have 15 to 20 award nominations. Some have 4 or 5,000. And so the latter has to really think through like how they want to conduct a review, because you physically can't have certain staff members reviewing all the nominations. I noted it in here, but on average, a typical review committee member can't look at more than 15 to 20 nominations. After that, their energy levels fall off dramatically, and it's not fair to the nominees because they're not getting the energy that they deserve for a review. So I think the first thing that we want to look at is, as you structure your review process, so you took in all your nominations. Obviously, reviewer has you covered there. We're very much going to skip over operation stuff today. But now that you have your nominations, how do you want to pair them up with teams to review? And I'm going to kind of run through a couple common examples and also show you here what NAR is doing for their 30 and 30. But the first thing I think you need to look at is, what is the energy bandwidth of our committee? So if you're not already surveying them, you probably should. Let's figure out, like, what number of nominations do you feel comfortable reviewing? That in itself gets you a starting place, right? So if you're figuring out, okay, well, all of my reviewers on average, don't want to look at more than 20, and you've got a certain number of submissions, that'll tell you either A, how many more reviewers or judges you need to recruit, or how you want to distribute those submissions out. It's very possible that not everybody gets looked at by the entire review committee. So the common ways that I see a review process structure is kind of a combination of a couple things. Number one is you can have a review committee or panel per award. So if you have 5 different award categories, you can have little pods and teams and committees. Each one's in charge of their own. So if you have 100 nominations spread across 10 different awards, great. You have 10 different committees. I've also seen this done just based off of pure volume play. So we have 100 nominations. I want to create 5 review buckets. That's great. Each review bucket has 5 team members. They're reviewing a certain number. What I will tell you is the most common approach that we've started to see, though, is randomization. So, you've got in one hand a bunch of nominations, and then in another hand a bunch of potential evaluators. And what they basically will say is, okay, well, I want to ensure that every nominee gets looked at the same number of times, right? I don't want somebody that gets reviewed twice and somebody that get reviewed 22 times, right? That's just not going to be fair. So maybe we say, I want every nominee to get reviewed 5 times. And then you can also say at the same time, but I don't want my team to have to look at more than 20 people. I'll show you how to do this in Reviewer, but then we're basically taking your submissions at random and equally distributing it out to your committee to ensure that things match up. I would also say I like to see that in conjunction with phases. So generally speaking, most of these awards are multi-round. So submissions come in, they go through a review process, high level vetting, thumbs up, thumbs down. From there, you narrow it down to a much smaller number. Another team comes in, conducts a bit more formal of a review. And then from there, they narrow it down like the top X per category or just the top X. And then a final committee is going to go through, they're going to review them, they're going to deliberate, and they're going to pick the recipients. In this example, and I'm going to show this to you, there's a fourth component, which is a public showcase. Now, I see this done 2 different ways. One is they don't do public voting. They just take the award nominees and or the finalists. They put them onto a public page for the membership to go and see. Again, if you're trying to target a younger demographic that didn't get nominated or didn't participate, what better way of showcasing, hey, that could be me. So next year, that's going to be me, right? On top of that, though, is that's when you really get into public voting. I'll get into some of the negative ramifications of it here in a moment or right now. But public voting is great because A, you can weight it. So it actually has a small overarching weight, or you can have like a fan favorite, but it's a way to take all of your membership and tie them into your program. So, some other member might be publicly viewing the nominations, casting their votes, picking their favorite, or again, you're collecting their data. So what I want to say by that, I'm going to show this to you, is public voting inherently is flawed. Like, you can go to Fiverr or Upwork and you can buy votes. It's going to happen, right? So in Reviewer, ideally you have people either A, register, or B, log in to cast a vote. That way you can start to limit them to a certain number. So, we know who you are because you logged in. So you can vote once per day, once per week, once ever. It's also nice because we know who they are. So from like a marketing perspective, you now have this giant list of voters who in turn could be judges next year. They could be nominees next year, right? It's again a way for you to opt them into your newsletters and your communication tools. Again, just keep in mind that there's nothing preventing them from, going out there and registering 30 accounts and applying multiple times. So with that said, I want to show you all those things. Again, just what's better than a visual representation of it. So let's go ahead and let's pull, not this, one second here. Let's jump back to Reviewer. And I want to show you number one, operationally speaking, how do you view those submissions? I use the terminology profile quite a bit, so I do want to kind of visualize that. So in Reviewer, we are going to bounce around here a little bit. You do get these dashboards, right? So you can kind of jump around. You can track your progress percentages. You can track your emails that are going out, all sorts of cool things. What I wanted to show you though is this menu system. And this menu is a listing of either A, all of your nominators, or B, all of your nominees, or C, a combination of both. And it shows you a list of basically all the participants to your program. From here, you can actually open them up, and then this is how you can visualize that nomination. So here's Ryan. Ryan's our nominee, and you can see all the information that Ryan submitted to us. Kind of neat, nice, and tidy. It's all in one centralized hub. As I scroll through here, I have Ryan's information. There's a video link, there's a photo, there's some file uploads, there's a reference. And in our system, you can actually one-to-one communicate with your applicants if you want to. You could leave internal notes about them. Going back to your file uploads, you'll notice that there's a list of every file that was ever uploaded. So I can actually press the view button and it'll show the document in Reviewer. What that means is that if you're collecting photos, videos, PowerPoint, spreadsheets, whatever, 130 specific file types, you can visualize them and look at those deliverables in Reviewer and not have to download them, export them, use other tools, come back later. Foreshadowing, that's beautiful for judging. As I kind of move on, I mentioned those references. So remember, Frederick was our example. So Frederick was emailed. He then uploaded a reference. If I press the view button, boom, there is what Frederick said about Ryan. It's also a cool way to track nominations. So maybe Ryan was nominated 5 times. You could actually have a line item for each of the 5 nominators, and then it'll show you what was said about them. So really cool and powerful things that are happening here. What I really wanted to show you though is those review workflows. So here is exactly how we're doing it here within our 30 under 30. They broke their review process into kind of two pieces, and it's a conjunction of two. So they broke it down to 4 regions. So you have 4 regional buckets. So when somebody applies, the system drops the applicant or the nominee into the region. Thinking bigger picture. Again, those could be your different award categories, whatever it might be. And then number two is it's a 3-phase program. So you're judged at the regional level. They then narrow it down to the top 50 to bring everybody together. And then from there, they narrow it down to a much more small number, which they call finalists. So again, it's used to manage and categorize nominees, but also progress them throughout the journey. The reason why this is great, though, and again, going back to that randomization earlier on, is you can make some assumptions here. So, for example, I have Region 1. You can call that whatever you want. You can call it your 30 under 30. You can call it your new member of the year. You can call it your Hall of Fame. But you have a bunch of nominees now in that bucket. The next step is to assign that bucket to a committee. So whenever Simon, Paul, and Mark come into Reviewer, they're only going to see the nominations in that bucket you gave them access to. So again, thinking bigger picture, this is how you create those pods or those teams and kind of break down the submissions from a very large number into some more bite-sized pieces. The way I like to do this, though, is if I open these buckets up, let's just make up a simple example. It'll show us all of our nominations. So maybe there's 100 nominees. It'll show you a list of all 100 of them. It'll also show you currently how many people have been assigned to review them and then who those individuals are. So the way I love to do this is I'll say, you know what? I know there's 2 variables. Number one is I have to make sure that every nominee gets looked at 5 times, and I want to make sure that nobody's looking at more than 25 nominations. So I can then bulk select these. I can just type that in. I can literally type in, give every applicant to 5 reviewers and make sure that no reviewers get more than 25. And then our system equally and randomly will auto distribute those nominations out to your review committees. We'll look at what they see here in just a minute, but again, it's a great way to do that. Now, if there is conflicts of interest or they have to recuse themselves, there is a way in review where we can get very, very manual. What I mean by that is I can click Mark's name. Mark is one of my judging committee members, and I'm going to say, let's unselect Gabrielle and then reassign it to somebody else. So really powerful things there. The last thing I want to talk about today is actually conducting the review. Again, both formal judging, like we're looking at here, and the public voting. So, kind of jumping ahead. The reason why I want to talk about this, though, is I think all of these programs, again, generally speaking, I think, we started talking about 30 to 30 awards. We have to kind of keep going down that path. But if you're doing scholarships, grants, fellowships, board nominations, conference abstracts, you name it, everything should start with some type of KPI or mathematic-based score sheet. The reason why I say that is that we want to take as much subjective influence out of the review as humanly possible. With that said, I would say most programs do have some type of discussion or deliberation about the finalists. So it's about leveraging data to make informed decisions and not be the end all be all factor. So the way I like to kind of structure this and set things up is I like to consider some type of score sheet. I think that the score sheet should align with two things. One is it should align with your nomination form. So if you're collecting things like essays and short answers or metrics, then your score sheet should match up with those, right? Number two is I think it should match up with your mission and vision. So in this example, like we're honoring 30 under 30, there needs to be some type of pillar for success, right? Like how can we say we're proud of this member as a 30 under 30? It should align with your organization's mission, vision, and statements. The other thing too that I want to note that I think oftentimes score sheets can be overly complex. And I mentioned earlier on that the name of the game is to lower the barrier for really both the nominator and the nominee. But I think you really also need to lower the barrier for review committees. These are volunteers. You want them to come back again next year. And so the way to do so is not necessarily making your score sheet shorter. It's you make them more emotional. And what I mean by that is if you give a committee member a score sheet and say, hey, go rank this person on a scale of 1 to something, 1 to 20, 1 to 10, whatever it might be, they instantly become a bit overwhelmed. They have to try to justify the difference between a 16 and a 17, or they think things through. Instead, we want to ask them a series of questions. Rank this candidate from great to below average, and it triggers an emotional response. So the review committee is simply reviewing the submission form and then answering questions being posed to them. Now, behind the scenes, there absolutely is scorecards and mathematics that tie into the score sheet. Just the judge doesn't know that. They're just answering, interacting with the tool. Next thing they know, they're done. They reviewed somebody, but the system is still kind of kicking out leaderboard. So I'll kind of leave it at that. We'll then kind of look at what this looks like in reviewer. I also kind of want to note too that there is kind of the ideology behind redacting of data. It's less common with award programs because a lot of times you have to know who the nominee is to conduct a review. With that said, we are seeing a huge emerging trend of not. So basically, the review committee is evaluating the nominees on the short answers, the essays, the references, the nominations, the merits of their application, not who they are. The second piece to that is also the redaction of things like demographic details or PII or ethnicity, just to potentially take away any potential biases from the review team. So again, in reviewer, ideally, A, you do this pairing system we just looked at. B, you do some form of redaction, and then C, you conduct a review. So I just talked a little bit about how I would set up a review process. Here's what that looks like in reviewer. So when your committee comes into the system, they will see a menu, and that menu is a listing of the nominations you want them to review, quote unquote, what you want them to review. Because you may not show them the nomination and the application, you may just show them the application. You may have a bunch of data you're collecting for record keeping purposes. Don't show that to the review team. It just creates an extra barrier. So the review team will see this menu, right? And then they simply click on either the name or the ID of the nominee if you are redacting information. And then they get this nice little split screen. So half of the page is going to be the nomination form, and the other half is the score sheet. Now, I get it. I just told you not to use 1 through 10 scales. There's no right or wrong way of running an award. In this example, it's only a 6-question score sheet, so it actually works really, really well. And as you can see here, it does map and tie directly to the form. So the first question is like, is this their last year to apply? So if they're 29, or sorry, if they're 39 years old or 29 years old, whatever that threshold is, they might weight that higher because they've been nominated for 5 consecutive years and they haven't yet received an award. It then kind of gets into things like about the nominee. It gets into like strengths of the application. It gets into references. So the judge can kind of side by side read through things, answer a series of questions, then they're done. So in this example, I think it's okay. Again, what you could instead do is the question here, strength of sales volume. You could say like, how do you feel about this candidate from below average to exemplary, right? And then behind the scenes, you're still assigning point values to it. But the entire goal here is that side-by-side judging. So the review committee can actually read through the application, answer the score sheet. If you want them to look at file uploads, they just simply click on the attachments. They can open it up from here to embed itself. They can read the references, again, all without having to leave the system. So then from here, what ends up happening is it kicks out a leaderboard. We're going to kind of come back to that here a little bit because I do want to show you the public voting. So I mentioned a little bit about the judging process. Here's what public voting in Reviewer may look like. So it's a public page. Now, right now, it can be used for both public voting and or a showcase of submissions. So it shows you all of your nominees. This is pulled from their profile. So you can actually control what shows up. So we have our headshots, we have the name of the nominees, we've got like a short description of them. And then what I would do is I would click read more, and then boom, it actually shows a public bio of that member. So off to the right, as you can see here, there's like what, 6 questions? That nomination form was way longer than that. So we're only targeting these 6 questions that we want to publicly show up. If you are collecting multimedia, there's a full image gallery, you can watch videos, but the idea is that the voter would quickly log in. So now we know who they are. So you can now mark it to them. They cast their vote, which could be a thumbs up, thumbs down, or I should say thumbs up, 1 through 5, 1 through 10. Again, got to keep it short, simple, and sweet. And then from here, now you've got 2 different parallel tracks. You got your back end formal judging, but then you got your public fan favorite judging. And now that's on you guys to decide what you want to do with that. So it's very common to do 2 things. One, you weight this. So like the public voting is like 5% of the overall score, or B, you have 2 different tracks. You've got your normal winners, and then you have a fan favorite. And you can do fan favorite per category, whatever it might be. So that's how the 30 under 30 is structured. Again, I showcase here the videos. The last thing I want to show you is the selection process. And this is kind of a little bonus I want to show you because I introduced a big problem, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So in Reviewer, we actually kick out these leaderboards, and it'll show you, again, every single nominee. It shows you the team or the committee that judged them, how they score them individually, collectively, averages, etc. So you can see here, Ryan is our highest rated applicant. Ryan has a score of a 28.8. And so from here, you can bulk select them and then advance them to phase 2, phase 3. You can pick them as your winners. Or what I want to show you is the normalization of results. So I mentioned earlier on that if you do random judging, that typically implies that not every nominee is going to get reviewed by the same people. So what happens if this occurs? I have Mark here. Mark scored Sheldon a 12. So my first question is, okay, did Mark just score Sheldon low? Or like, what if Mark has never given higher than a 15? So giving a 12 to Sheldon isn't a bad thing. It's actually a really, really good score. However, Mark is just a challenging judge. So how do we not penalize Sheldon or reward somebody for getting a lenient judge? So in Reviewer, we actually have a really cool reporting concept. It's called a normalization report. And basically what it does is it shows you every single nominee and who scored them. And then what you really care about is it shows you each individual judge's averages. So in this example, we have Judge Judy, who on average scores about a 24. We also have Tony over here, who on average scores about a 34. So plot twist, this is a real data. Everything's been redacted. This is actually from a university system using a reviewer. And what they had found is that every single year, nobody that Judge Judy scored ever won. Why is that? Well, on average, she scores a full 10 points lower. So now that we know that, we can start to normalize it. And how do we do that? Well, our system will do it automatically. So it changes the results. So if you were scored a 23.875, you're now a 1, because that means you were scored completely average. If you score higher than a 24, you're like a 1.1. If you're lower than 24, you're like a 0.9. So now we're taking each individual judge's averages, and then you compare them to one another. So now your end results look like this. I have Elon here, who got last place, who on average is about 2/10 of a point lower than average, whereas Bruce on average is your winner because he scored almost 1.15 times higher than average. So again, that's kind of a little bit of a bonus I want to throw in there, primarily because I love randomized judging. The problem is it does pose potentially this risk. So My goal is to give us 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. It looks like we gave ourselves exactly 20 minutes, so I'll go ahead and just pat myself on the back. So with all that said, any questions you have for me about the program in general, about the platform, I'm happy to answer whatever I can. I think the beauty of my job is, we work with so many different demographics of organizations, from humongous membership-based associations to university systems to two-person charitable foundations. And everybody does things differently. And that's a good thing because we've started to see, really, really well-run programs. We've started to identify emerging trends and best practices that, many people on this call today might be looking for information. That's great. If there's anything I can do for you. Others have been doing their awards for 50 years. It's a well-oiled machine. You're looking for a software to streamline it. Again, I got you covered. So I'll hang out for as long as you want, but any questions about your programs, about NAR, about our platform, I'm happy to answer whatever it is I can. Yeah, so the question that just came in around kind of, just kind of in research phase. Yeah, absolutely. So again, we'll follow up with some more information about the platform, about the topic today, any of my personal contact information. So in this example, if there's anything I can do for you, from a consultative perspective, I've been doing this now for I'm gonna start to age myself here. 12 years, give or take, 11 years. Seen a lot of really, really, really well-ran programs, less well-ran programs as well. So it's very much our passion. I mentioned beforehand, we named it reviewer for a reason. We were the review committees. And so again, we built the platform backwards to not only make our lives easier, but also kind of for the people, by the people type of concept. So any questions I can. Question that came out on pricing. It is a little bit available online. That's more like a personal conversation we'll have. The reason why I say that is our pricing model is very, very unique. It's dynamic. That's based off of two variables. There's a subscription like most companies, and then it's typically priced based on the number of applicants you receive. So again, it kind of goes back to our roots where historically speaking, most organizations would budget for software for large campaigns. Well, if you have I'm going to make up a totally irrelevant example, a scholarship program that has 10 applicants, but 4 of them go to spam, we got a big compliance problem on our hands. So because of that, our pricing model is intended to not alienate smaller programs, but also allow larger programs to grow and scale where price should not be a hindrance to your growth. So I can send over some pricing details, but also it's a conversation we can have, based off of your anticipated volume. So the question came in about like the judges randomization and like, can they see only their scores or others? That's a configuration that you can control. I would say very, very, very rarely do we ever see judges allowed to see how other judges are scoring. It's more so they come in, they view the menu of submissions, they conduct their scores. A lot of times they will be allowed to see how they scored themselves, just because after they review everybody, they may want to go back and like reevaluate the high or low people or relook at the first couple. And then at some point you got to lock it down, right? Or you can't allow them to change scores. But you don't want like what some judges are doing to influence other judges. What I will say though is that once judging is complete, it is somewhat common to share either the scores and or the notes to the other judges. That way, if you're going to do like a deliberation meeting, they're coming prepared. They kind of know, what the results look like and how other people scored, so they can be very, very productive. But I would say more times than not, it's pretty private. Yeah. So for the multi-phase review process, mass uploading reviewers. So number one is there's multiple ways to get your review teams into the platform. You can individually add them as you go. You can bulk import them. There are some benefits around doing a bulk import. So for example, like you can start to create automations. So you can like bulk import them into buckets. But with that said, like it doesn't have to be all done at one time. It's very common to be adding people or removing people and replacing them at any time. So that's up to you. It's just there's two different ways of getting them into the system, either manually clicking add reviewer and putting their information in, or importing them. Now, once they're into reviewer, we want them to have access to certain stuff, right? And so you'll send out an invite. So basically they get an email, they click on a link and that brings them into the platform. And then from there, they're only gonna be able to access whatever you want them to see. So either the submissions and or the elements of the submission. So we take data privacy and security very, very serious at reviewer. So you have very deep control over who can see what and when and how. And I'll kind of just keep rambling too as I'm waiting for more questions to come in. And on that note, again, you can have different evaluators and review staff in different phases or different buckets. You might have them make up a number of 50 people as part of your review committee. They can all be assigned out to different phases at any time. So you can kind of pre-build your entire workflow, and then the system just kind of goes off on its own, right? So you'll progress people, the reviewers will come in, they'll fill out their score sheets, and you can have different review workflows and different kind of judging criteria and different dates and deadlines. We accommodate all of that. So for anybody on the call today, please don't hesitate. Thank you so much.